The sun hung low in the spring sky, painting the quiet suburban street in a warm golden glow. 16-year-old Jalen Carter maneuvered his electric wheelchair down the sidewalk, excitement fluttering in his chest like the wings of a butterfly. He had just finished his Saturday tutoring session and was eager to join his friends at the corner park for a friendly game of cards and laughter. Despite the slight limp in his right hand from cerebral palsy, Jalen's face shone with joy and the genuine pleasure of youth. As he rolled past neat lawns and blossoming flower beds, he spotted Mrs. Rodriguez watering her roses. "Good afternoon, Miss Rodriguez," he called out cheerfully, prompting her to pause, towel her brow, and offer a radiant smile. "You have such determination, Jalen," she said, watering can poised midair. "Never let anyone dull that spark." Encouraged, Jalen returned her wave and continued on. A few yards ahead, a sudden pain seized Jalen's side. It was sharp and unexpected, like a lightning strike on calm water. He gasped, gripping the armrest tightly, and his wheelchair came to a jarring halt. Confusion washed over him before fear took hold. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he bent forward, trying to catch his breath. The world tilted, the blossoms on the trees blurred into streaks of color. He hoped it would pass in a moment, but the pain intensified, rippling through his torso. "Are you okay?" called a passerby, a young man in a delivery uniform. He hovered uncertainly nearby, cell phone in hand. Jalen tried to lift his head, his voice thick with alarm. "I'm hurt," he managed, "I need help." His words escaped in ragged bursts, each syllable a struggle. Moments later, a sleek black and white patrol car cruised along the curb. Officer Wilson, known in these parts for his strict demeanor, slid to a stop. His gaze flicked from the delivery man's phone to Jalen's wheelchair. With the authority of the badge pinning him in place, he stepped out of the vehicle and surveyed the scene. "Move along, kid," Wilson barked, his tone cold and commanding. "This sidewalk is not a playground." Jalen's stomach dropped. He strove to answer, but the pain scorched his throat. Instead he gasped again, clasping the side of his chair in desperation. The delivery man hesitated before blurting, "Sir, he looks like he is in real pain. Maybe we should call an ambulance." A twitch of impatience flickered across Wilson's face. He pointed at Jalen, his finger rigid with disdain. "He's faking it to get attention," the officer sneered. "Everyone around here knows these wheelchair kids are always looking for special treatment." A hush fell. Blood pounded in Jalen's temples as anger raged hotter than his pain. He raised a trembling hand. "Sir, I promise I am not faking," he croaked. His words trembled, tinged with humiliation and hurt. The delivery man shook his head, frustrated. "He is definitely not faking," he muttered under his breath. Silence pressed in. Jalen could almost hear the expectant beat of his own heart, each thump a plea for mercy. Cars slowed 2 blocks away as commuters craned their necks, curious or appalled. Children playing in nearby yards froze and cocked their heads. Tears welled in Jalen's eyes, not from physical agony but from the sting of injustice. He remembered the lessons his mother taught him: stand tall when the world tries to push you down. He drew in a shuddering breath and tried again. "Sir, please," he said softly yet firmly, surprising himself with his courage, "I need medical help now." His voice cracked, sincerity shining through the quiver. Wilson stared at him, his jaw set. Then he turned abruptly, walked back to his patrol car, and sat down. Jalen's chest tightened. He watched through tears as the officer began to fiddle with the radio inside the cruiser, neither looking at him nor reaching for the door. The delivery man exchanged a worried look with a neighbor who had emerged from her house in slippers clutching a mug of coffee. Both shrugged helplessly. An awkward stillness settled like dust over the scene. Jalen's breath came in short pants. He blinked hard, fighting back a wave of panic. In that moment humor bubbled up unexpectedly. He thought about his best friend Marcus's goofy grin when he lost at cards last week and how he joked that Jalen's wheelchair was rigged. A small, ironic laugh escaped Jalen's lips even as tears slipped down his cheeks. At least the pain distracted him from despair for a searing second. But the moment passed and reality crashed back harder than before. He felt faint. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. The last thing he heard was the distant wailing of an ambulance siren and the harsh stomp of Wilson's boot as the officer exited the cruiser. Wilson strode toward Jalen with deliberate steps. A tremor of hope tickled Jalen's spine. Surely now the officer would change his mind. Then Wilson raised his hand and flicked off the siren on his radio with a sudden jerk. He shook his head and said flatly, "No need for theatrics. You are fine, kid. Call someone from home if you want attention." With that he turned on his heel and walked back to his car door. Jalen's heart plummeted. The delivery man exploded into furious activity. He yanked his phone from his pocket and dialed 911 while pacing behind Jalen's wheelchair. "Hello, yes, this is an emergency," he said urgently. Jalen squeezed his eyes shut, relief and dread colliding inside him. Relief that help was finally on the way, dread at the injustice of it all. Bystanders gathered, murmurs rising. Some shook their heads in silent outrage. Others squeezed Jalen's chair handles with gentle reassurance. Even Mrs. Rodriguez appeared, watering can abandoned, her face etched with stern disapproval as she stared at the patrol car. Jalen felt every emotion in rapid succession: anger at being dismissed, humiliation from having to beg for aid, gratitude toward the delivery man and neighbors, suspense as the siren grew louder, and a flicker of hope that things might soon change. In that moment he understood the fragile power of a single voice to make a difference. He braced himself for the arrival of proper help, determined that this story would not end with neglect. He lifted his chin and whispered quietly to himself, "I will not be invisible." And as the ambulance raced into view, its lights splashing red and blue across the pavement, Jalen felt a fierce surge of resolve. He was not just a disabled black teen. He was a person whose voice mattered. And on this afternoon, that realization blazed brighter than any golden sunset. The ambulance thundered onto the scene, its siren cutting through the heavy silence like a knife. Paramedics leapt out, their faces etched with urgency and compassion. They knelt beside Jalen and began checking his vital signs, murmuring reassurances in calm, practiced tones. Relief washed over him like a cool wave after a scorching day. At last someone saw his pain and would help him. As Jalen was lifted onto a gurney and secured, the gathering crowd parted respectfully. Mrs. Rodriguez dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, her expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. Jalen caught her gaze and offered a small thumbs up. Her smile was fierce with solidarity. Nearby, the delivery man hovered, phone still in hand, dialing updates to worried friends and family. Within minutes the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle roared off toward the regional hospital. The crowd dispersed slowly, many stopping to whisper amongst themselves. Word of what had happened spread like wildfire along the row of parked cars and front porches. People shook their heads in outrage as they replayed the video clip saved on Maya's phone. Some clenched their fists at the memory of Officer Wilson's callous words. Others felt a sickening twist in their stomachs at the thought of a child in pain being dismissed for no reason. Back at his desk, Officer Wilson scrolled through his department-issued tablet to find his radio had been silent. A notification blinked, emergency call for a disabled teen. He frowned, convincing himself that Jalen must have exaggerated again. He shrugged and moved on, never imagining the viral storm that was about to engulf him. 2 hours later, Jalen lay in a private room at Mercy General Hospital. His mother Valerie sat beside him, holding his hand tight as if she could somehow absorb his pain. A stack of text messages buzzed on her phone, friends, neighbors, even strangers offering support and fast healing vibes. Valerie's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude. She pressed Jalen's hand and whispered, "I love you so much, stay strong." Jalen managed a faint smile and squeezed back. In that moment he felt the full sweep of emotions: anger at the injustice he had endured, relief that help finally came, pride that his community rallied on his behalf, and silent hope that no other child would suffer the same fate. He closed his eyes, breathing deep, savoring the strength he discovered within himself and around him. Meanwhile, across town, the local police chief sat in a meeting room scrolling through social media. He winced as the video clip of Officer Wilson refusing aid to Jalen blew up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and a dozen neighborhood forums. Hashtags like Justice for Jalen and Accountability Now were trending nationwide. News outlets contacted the department for comment, reporters camped outside headquarters demanding answers. The chief's jaw clenched. He stood and addressed his commanding officers one by one. "We cannot ignore this any longer. That behavior does not reflect our values." A stunned silence followed. Some officers shrugged dismissively, others exchanged guilty glances. The chief continued with firmness in his voice. "Officer Wilson will be placed on paid administrative leave pending a full investigation. We will cooperate fully with the Independent Oversight Board." On the hospital's live news screen, anchor voices crackled out updates on Jalen's condition. The teen remains stable and is receiving follow-up care to ensure no lasting complications. Portraits of Jalen's smiling face flashed in a news ticker, accompanied by pictures of Wilson in uniform. Opinions poured in from commentators, civil rights activists, and medical experts denouncing the refusal to help a disabled patient in obvious distress. Late that evening, Maya and her younger brother watched the televised statements at home. Their mother prepared warm soup in the kitchen as Maya said softly, "I am proud that I hit record." Her brother nodded fiercely. "You did the right thing. Without your video, no one would know." Maya's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. She replayed the moment she captured Jalen's plea for help, vowing never to look away again. Across town at the Carter family home, Jalen's father Marcus arrived after a long drive from his job as a firefighter. He hugged his son with fierce relief. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he tightened his embrace. "You are the bravest kid I know," Marcus said, voice thick with emotion. He sat beside Valerie and they listened as Jalen recounted every detail. Though Jalen's words trembled, his resolve shone bright. He would not let this injustice define him forever. Over the next days, Jalen's story inspired a tidal wave of action. A GoFundMe campaign launched by his classmates surpassed its goal in a matter of hours, raising funds for his therapy and school supplies. Local youth groups organized art shows themed around empathy and inclusion. A state senator tweeted a promise to introduce legislation requiring compulsory medical aid training for every law enforcement officer. Social media echoed with the voices of disabled teens sharing their own experiences of neglect or discrimination. One afternoon Jalen received a video call from a popular disability rights advocate whom he admired. The advocate praised his courage and invited him to speak at a virtual town hall meeting attended by lawmakers, community leaders, and citizens from across the country. Jalen hesitated, heart pounding with nerves and excitement. Could he make a real difference? He nodded decisively and agreed to participate. In that moment his anger at being ignored transformed into a force for change. On the day of the town hall, Jalen sat in his wheelchair at his desk, wearing a crisp collared shirt. His mother, father, and Maya offered encouraging thumbs up behind him. As the screen filled with friendly faces, Jalen took a steadying breath. He began to speak with clarity and passion about his own experience, his pain, and his hopes for a system that treats every person with dignity and care. He spoke of the outrage he first felt, the relief when help finally arrived, and the courage he found in the solidarity of his community. By the time Jalen finished, tears glistened in many eyes. Applause broke out, even through webcams and phone screens. One by one, attendees voiced their support for the proposed legislation, for mandatory medical aid protocols, and for cultural sensitivity training in every police academy. Jalen's voice had sparked conversation and commitment on a national scale. As the town hall ended, Jalen exhaled, feeling a profound mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He glanced back at his family and friends on screen, overwhelmed with gratitude. He thought back to that fateful afternoon when pain and injustice threatened to break him. Now he realized that moment had become a catalyst for change. The teen who was once dismissed and ignored had found his voice and rallied a movement. And though the road ahead would demand continued effort, Jalen knew he would never again be invisible. A week after the town hall, tension crackled through the crowded council chamber as Jalen, his parents, and Maya sat in the front row. The morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating rows of concerned citizens, reporters jotting notes furiously, and community activists wearing bright ribbons for justice. Jalen's heart pounded against his ribs like a drum. Every face in the room seemed to hold a different emotion: anger, hope, curiosity, solidarity. When his name was called, Jalen rose slowly from his wheelchair. His palms felt clammy, but he inhaled deeply and squared his shoulders. As he wheeled forward to the witness stand, he caught his mother's steady nod and his father's reassuring smile. Maya gave him a thumbs up from the back. In that moment, he knew he was not alone. The panel of oversight board members sat behind a raised desk, their expressions solemn. At the center was Chairwoman Alvarez, a stern but fair woman whose voice carried authority. She invited Jalen to speak. He cleared his throat, surprise fluttering in his chest like a trapped bird. Then he began, his voice steady, "My name is Jalen Carter. On April 8 at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, Officer Patrick Wilson refused to provide medical assistance when I was clearly in distress. I was in pain. I was alone. I called for help. He ignored me." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Jalen paused, fear and anger mingling in his throat. But he pressed on, recalling every detail: the sudden pain, the officer's cruel words, the humiliating dismissal. He described how Maya's quick thinking captured the truth, how neighbors rallied, and how social media amplified his plea for justice. With each sentence, his confidence grew. By the time he finished, his eyes shone with a fierce determination. Next, Officer Wilson took the stand. He adjusted his uniform collar with a rigid stiffness, clearing his throat before denying any wrongdoing. His voice was flat and defensive. He claimed Jalen's injuries did not appear serious. He alleged the teen overdramatized his pain, and insisted he had more important duties to attend. A hush fell as the board members exchanged concerned glances. When Chairwoman Alvarez asked if he had formal training in providing emergency aid to disabled civilians, Wilson struggled to answer. He admitted he had received only minimal first aid instruction years ago and had never practiced with someone in a wheelchair. The room shifted uncomfortably. Reporters seized on every word. One board member pressed him further: "Do you regret your actions?" Wilson hesitated, then muttered, "I followed my judgment at the time." At that moment, a collective gasp echoed. Jalen's mother gripped her son's hand. His father's jaw clenched. Maya's fingers drummed anxiously against her notebook. The community's outrage had found a voice in the boardroom. After both testimonies, Chairwoman Alvarez recessed the hearing for deliberation. The crowd murmured as journalists typed furiously, and activists discussed next steps. Jalen and his family slipped out to the hallway where dozens of supporters awaited. They embraced, laughter and tears mingling in a cathartic release. Jalen felt gleeful relief. The momentum he sparked had forced accountability into the highest chambers of local government. Later that evening, the board reconvened. Attendees filled the gallery in hopeful anticipation. When Chairwoman Alvarez rose to read the findings, a hush fell. Her voice trembled slightly with emotion. After careful review of the evidence and testimony, we find that Officer Patrick Wilson exhibited gross negligence and discriminatory bias toward Jalen Carter. His refusal to render medical aid to a disabled minor was unacceptable and violated our department's duty to protect all citizens. Therefore, we recommend the immediate termination of Officer Wilson's employment and mandatory bias and first aid training for all officers within 30 days. A wave of exhilaration and vindication washed through the chamber. Jalen's heart swelled. Tears sprang unbidden to his eyes as the crowd erupted in applause. He looked at his parents, beaming, and Maya high-fived him. The reporter beside him whispered, "Your courage changed everything." Outside City Hall, jubilant chants of "Justice for Jalen" rose into the night air. Activists marched arm in arm, carrying hand-painted signs that read, "No more silence," and "Protect and serve everyone." Jalen maneuvered his wheelchair among them, laughter bubbling in his chest. He felt proud and empowered, knowing his voice had made a real difference. Amid the celebration, Jalen noticed Officer Wilson watching from the steps, flanked by two fellow officers. The once arrogant man's face looked smaller, haunted by the weight of his actions. For a brief moment their eyes met. Jalen felt neither triumph nor vengeance. Instead he felt compassion for someone who had failed to see his humanity until confronted with the truth. As the night wind carried the echoes of victory through the streets, Jalen realized his journey was far from over. This win was a milestone, not the finish line. He would continue to speak up for those who could not, to ensure every person, disabled or not, received the care and respect they deserved. That night he closed his eyes knowing pain and injustice still existed. Yet he also knew how fierce and unstoppable a single voice could be. In standing up for himself, Jalen had stood up for countless others. And in that moment of triumph, he felt an unshakable conviction that compassion and courage could indeed change the world. Weeks passed in a whirlwind of progress and promise. Jalen's story continued to resonate far beyond his neighborhood, inspiring conversations in town halls, living rooms and classrooms across the country. The moment of reckoning at the council hearing had set in motion reforms that no one had dared imagine before. Jalen watched in quiet amazement as the community rallied behind him, transforming outrage into opportunity for real change. At school the following Monday, Jalen hesitated before entering the auditorium where his peers had gathered for an assembly. He felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. When he rolled onto the stage greeted by thunderous applause, his heart swelled with gratitude. The principal introduced him as a champion of empathy and courage, then stepped aside. Jalen paused, letting the applause wash over him, then began to speak in his clear steady voice. "I am honored and humbled by all of you here today," he said. "What happened to me could happen to anyone. I was just asking for help when I needed it. Thanks to Maya's recording and your voices, our town decided that every person deserves compassion and medical care regardless of ability or background." His words drew cheers and nods from the audience. But this is only the beginning. We must keep learning, keep listening, and keep standing up when we see injustice. Together we can make sure no one feels invisible. After the assembly, students surrounded Jalen with high fives and hugs. Marcus, his father, watched proudly from the side, eyes shining. He mouthed the words "Well done, son," and Jalen felt his chest swell with joy. Maya returned his smile, wiping away a tear as she said softly, "You changed the world." That afternoon at the police precinct, a new era was dawning. Chief Daniels stood before the assembled officers and staff. He reviewed the recently adopted policies that mandated comprehensive first aid training, disability awareness workshops and strict accountability measures for any refusal to render aid. He addressed the department with sincerity and urgency. "As law enforcement officers we pledge to protect and serve every member of our community," he said. "That pledge is more than words on a badge. It demands empathy, competence and an unwavering commitment to human dignity. We owe that to every person we encounter." The officers listened intently, some exchanging thoughtful glances, others nodding with determination. News crews filmed the training sessions in progress. Jalen and other advocates were invited to share their experiences and insights, ensuring that the reforms would be guided by real voices. When Jalen described the terror of being ignored and the relief of finally receiving aid, officers sat forward, their faces a mixture of remorse and resolve. One veteran patrolman whispered to his partner, "I never knew how important this was until now." On a crisp Saturday morning, the city hosted a celebration in the park where Jalen's ordeal had begun. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze proclaiming unity and justice. Booths offered free health screenings, adaptive sports demonstrations and information on disability rights. Live music lifted spirits as families gathered, children chased bubbles and neighbors embraced. In the center of it all stood Jalen, wearing a bright t-shirt that read "Justice for All." As he watched a group of young wheelchair riders navigate an obstacle course, Jalen felt a profound sense of purpose. His journey from fear and pain to hope and empowerment had become a catalyst for community healing. Parents thanked him for opening eyes, teachers praised his leadership, and local officials promised continued support. Standing beside him, Maya caught his eye and grinned. "This is amazing," she said. Jalen nodded, feeling the warmth of sunshine on his face. "It's more than I ever imagined," he replied. Later that day Jalen's family gathered for a picnic under the shade of an old oak tree. They savored sandwiches and homemade lemonade as they laughed about lighter moments, Valerie's surprise at how quickly Jalen's classmates rallied to his side, Marcus's awkward attempt to dance at the school assembly and Maya's perfect capture of the crucial video with no shaky footage. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows, Jalen took a moment to reflect. He thought of the fear he had felt when pain struck and no one would help, of the anger that ignited his determination, and of the profound sense of unity that followed. He realized that courage often begins with a single voice refusing to stay silent, and that real change requires everyone's commitment. He turned to his parents and Maya and said with gentle confidence, "Today we celebrate how far we have come, but tomorrow we keep moving forward. We keep speaking up, learning and caring for each other." They all nodded in agreement, their bond strengthened by adversity and triumph. As the sky faded to twilight, Jalen looked around at faces full of hope and solidarity. He knew that the ripples of this moment would continue spreading far beyond his town. In his heart he felt a promise as clear as the evening stars: the world could become more compassionate, more just and more inclusive if people refused to turn away from one another. And with that belief guiding him, Jalen Carter embraced the promise of tomorrow, ready to continue his journey as an advocate, a leader and a beacon for change.